I call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. At this time, I apologize, but I do need to recommend that we, and if there's no objection, move to adjust the agenda slightly. We have a scheduling issue with an outside attorney that we need to, will force us to move into executive or closed session at this time. And at that point in time, we will only be taking up one issue, and that is 55.1.071, which is consultation with attorney. And that is in regards to 551.074, issues pertaining to appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. We do not expect this to be a lengthy phone call, but unfortunately, due to the outside counsel's time constraints, we need to make that adjustment. So at this time, the board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by the Texas Government Code Chapter 551, again, .071 and .074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 12:01. Reconvened in open session at 12:27. No action was taken in closed session. We're back in. We will be moving straight into picking up the agenda as posted with citizens' comments. But with the number of citizens' comments that we do have, and where, and all these are regarding one topic, which is currently slated down at the end of the agenda. Dr. Merrill, we're going to move that agenda item up to right after public comment. So that, if you do want to stay and hear the resolution or where we're at, and the idea is that option will be following right after the citizens' comments. Okay, so at this time I would like to call up in order. I am going to call up for public comment. I will add that there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each presenter in each presentation. And at any time, if we get into any item that is deemed needs to be heard in closed session, i.e. it's regarding an individual student or faculty, then we will pause and reconvene in closed session. And the final thing that I will add is Ms. Lucas, Susan Lucas, is making her way to the podium. Is the board members cannot respond immediately to any public comment that you made, so you have 3 minutes. You will not receive any questions from the board members, but we will take your comments into consideration in the very next agenda item. Is Susan Lucas still here? Okay. Yes, ma'am, you're up.
Hi, you know that I'm Susan Lucas. I actually went to high school in this building, and I moved away, and I'm so glad that I moved back and I live in Bryan ISD. I felt that Bryan schools prepared me very educationally well for the years ahead, more than other districts of our size in the state. Back then, the district did not deviate from its true and only real academic mission and drift to the latest social engineering projects. And so I am hoping that the pronoun equity literacy misstep is an anomaly. I realize time is short before the school starts, but this issue certainly was not on most people's radar. Please either reject all the changes today and go back to 2021 Handbook, or at least later in the year when a more balanced approach can be addressed, or at least delay a few days before a meeting to vote in order to carefully consider everything that is talked about today and from the community that will be sent over the next few days. We're faced with the proverbial camel with his nose poked in the tent. If not stopped, the entire camel will be in this tent soon. The pronoun issue is just the first step in a much bigger, longer term extreme left agenda, both in terms of the handbook issue and in terms of using Equity Institute as a consultant. ELI is an extreme left company. The Equity Literacy Institute has said that they replaced emphasis with they and their to get away from gender distinction and to be more inclusive. For 20 years, the corporate world has used these words, as well as the word diversity, as a code word for the LGBT agenda. It takes less than 5 minutes for anybody on the ELI website to see that their theories and talking points are critical race theory, carefully omitted the word race and not mentioning color, but make no mistake, it is the same theory that the Texas legislature has banned from social studies and is in the process of banning from other places used in schools. ELI is in the social engineering business. For example, take two of their principles, poverty of culture, which says inequities are primarily power and privilege problems, not potentially cultural problems. So equity requires power and privilege solutions, not cultural solutions. And their ideological principles, which says that equity is a lens and an ideological movement. Your consensus values are not consistent with ELI. You should care because the community understands pronouns are the first step and are fearful of what is to come. Policies like this can cost you money that you can't afford to lose because of the loss of students. Parents will demand...
We're at 3 minutes. I apologize. We're at 3 minutes.
Okay.
The 3-minute limit.
Well,
I
I
apologize.
just have a couple more sentences.
Yes, ma'am, but we're at the 3-minute limit.
All right, thank you.
I apologize. I normally try to give you till the end of that sentence, but when you took the pause. Okay. Jessica Eckler? Sorry.
I was recently given a copy of Navigating the Transgender Landscape School Resource Guide. It has been endorsed by 14 medical professionals who reviewed every study that is referenced in this guide. I believe the board will find it very useful in best serving Bryan ISD students and respecting the rights of parents. Let me read a few of the fast facts from page 7. Science demonstrates that there are 2 sex chromosomes, 2 X chromosomes in females, or an X and a Y in males, in every single cell in our bodies, including the brain. Up to 98% of children who struggle with their sex as a boy or a girl come to accept their biological sex by adulthood, if not subjected to chemical or surgical interventions or social transition. Social transition includes change in pronouns. Most children who use drugs to block their puberty will go on to use cross-sex hormones, resulting in sterility, meaning they are unable to have children. Girls as young as 13 are undergoing double mastectomies, and boys as young as 17 are undergoing castration. The long-term effects of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for gender dysphoria have not been studied, meaning it is experimental. A major long-term study found that 10 years after gender transition surgery, trans-identified people were found to be nearly 20 times more likely to die from suicide than the general population. Maybe you're wondering why I'm reading these statistics. I'm reading this with you because the words we use matter. Replacing he or she with they and their is not without consequence. It removes the existence and differentiation of biological sex from language. The district very clearly stated the proposed pronoun change in the student handbook and code of conduct is a move away from gender distinction. So let me be very clear. A move away from gender distinction is ultimately a denial of biological sex. These documents are the foundation of district policy and communication, meaning by denying there is male and female on paper, it will be denied in the classroom as well. And what then? Do you want to be culpable in the manufacturing of gender dysphoria cases? Do you want to groom children to be subjected to the horrifying abuse of hormone treatment and surgery? Or will you commit to actually put children first? I ask the district to commit to use language responsibly. This means all use of pronouns in policy, documents, and communication should be determined by a person's biological sex. Please also read through this guide and familiarize yourself with the information. I believe it will be a very helpful resource for the district to create a safe and successful environment for all students. Thank you for your time. I live in single member District 4.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I give you?
Sure. Mr. Caswell, Jack Caswell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, that's mercy. My name is Jake Caswell, and I'm a citizen of Bryan. I'm thankful to live in a country that gives me the right of free speech, and thankful to Bryan Independent School District Board for this opportunity to address the meeting of the board. My concern today is the proposed changes to the student handbook, especially the pronoun changes. 2 weeks ago, while driving my car, I heard the local news twice, one at 5, one at 1, and one at noon and one at 5. The BISD was hiring a consultant to make pronoun changes to the student handbook. For what reason? For what purpose? From whom within the Bryan Independent School Organization was this even brought for consideration? Most importantly, just how does this help or improve the education of the student? I believe the members of the board have attained their success in any aspect of their lives by being referred to as he, she, him, her, or sir or madam. I think the students should have their own chance to think and learn and form their own opinions on any subject. Why are we making a move to literally change our society, to re-identify our being, change our language by forming new words and new meanings? Our language is our vehicle of communication. This world is so confusing enough that, so think about the students. I cannot comprehend any of the culture of change. They cannot comprehend any of the culture of change. They can't even hardly figure out who they are right now. They're learning. Your responsibility is to help them with the confusion and not add to it. You say children first always, then prove it. Do not change the pronouns and do not succumb to the culture of society change. All my life, I've heard that the cost of freedom, democracy, and liberty is constant vigilance. But who is to do the constant vigilance? It is us, each and every one of us, by standing up for the Lord, our Constitution, and always doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann Quimby.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm asking you to vote no on the proposal to remove gender-specific pronouns from the 2021-22 Handbook and Code of Conduct. This idea is an attempt to make human individuals all the same, and I find that not only immoral but ungodly. I'm a parent of 2 Bryan ISD graduates. They received a good education and they learned how to get along with fellow students individually as well as in group settings. They were treated with respect and were taught to respect fellow students. My children learned that people are different and that's normal to be different. I'm a bit perplexed by the very idea of removing gender-specific pronouns that's being considered by the Bryan ISD School Board. I'm a Christian, and I beg you not to allow this attempt to confuse children regarding who God made them to be. And I quote a scripture. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. That is found in Genesis 1:27, NIV. I do not understand how or why educated people would even attempt to challenge the Word of God. Biological sex is determined at conception. Nearly every cell makeup proves this by containing XX chromosomes for females and XY chromosomes for male, even in the brain. Since this occurs in the body, how is it not right in language? Who is man that he thinks he can challenge what God has made? I gave birth to a boy and a girl. There was no change in it. And that's normal, not evil. Life works well when people live by the order that God created. And I quote, male and female, he created them. Please vote no on the proposed gender-specific changes to the Bryan ISD 2021-2022 Handbook and Code of Conduct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jody Quimby.
I'm Jody Quimby, 4686 River Garden Court in Bryan. I'm here to address the proposed changes for the student handbook and code of conduct regarding gender-neutral terminology and identity, sexual orientation. As the previous gentleman indicated, I was also listening to a radio news report that included a recording of a portion of the board meeting on July 19th. I was disappointed to hear about the proposed revisions based on gender identity ideas. The proposed changes for the student handbook and code of conduct were described by a staff member to include, quote, removing he, she references and replacing them with they, their to get away from gender distinctions and to be more inclusive. That's pretty close to a straight quote. You should know this is code language that actually accuses BISD of discrimination and will lead BISD into a convoluted conundrum of gender identity, which can generally be defined by WebMD as how one feels about themselves and their sexuality. This is a personal opinion someone has about themselves. It not only is their personal opinion, but there's options within those bounds that just appear to be endless. Biology and obvious reality indicate that sex refers to two different physical conditions, male and female. It's not a psychological idea or an opinion generated by gender philosophy. There seems to be no boundaries with this psychobabble. It's a popular issue that has become fashionable because it's promoted to be supporting the oppressed and the helpless. However, gender identity philosophy can cause people that struggle with their personal identity to even be more unsure, to be less confident because of the myriad of choices that the gender identity poses for them rather than the reality of being male or female. The gender identity paradigm would be most damaging to females with loss of privacy in bathrooms and locker rooms and loss of opportunities in sports, as we have already heard about. If gender identity is included in the BISD documents, then this will be enabling an idea or an opinion to have more influence than the reality of who we are as humans, male and female. The items above are very compelling for me, but the most compelling reason for not changing he, she to they, their is that God Almighty made male and female in his own image and with the purpose of procreation, and these are undeniable facts. Another proposed change that was talked about is in the section on groups that are bullied and discriminated against. The proposed revision is to add gender identity and sexual orientation and religion to that section. The logic of adding to the list is incomplete because it does not include, for instance, the short kid, the fat kid, the skinny kid, and on and on and on. To name all the conditions of bullying and discrimination would be impossible.
Sorry, that's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Please reject those revisions. I'd appreciate that.
Kate Hamilton.
Hello, I'm Kay Hamilton, and I am a product of BISD, as was my husband and our 2 children. I had the privilege of teaching in BISD for 14 years. In the 1980s, I was a member of the Board of Trustees, and I was also a member of the BISD Education Foundation and former president. All of this to say, I have always been passionate about the success and well-being of our students. I'm here today to discuss the potential consequences of your changing the terminology in the student's handbook from he, she to they, their. And because of time constraints, I'll just mention a few points. There is a serious concern that in attempting to be more compassionate to a small group of students, you will open the door to a series of, well, then it follows that if there is no he, she, then there is no boy, girl, no man, woman, no mother, father. We're frequently encouraged to follow the science, and even the most basic science, and much more detail has already been given, we learned that the human body is composed of major systems, and one of those systems, of course, is the reproductive system. And we learned very early on when we studied about the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. So following the science, there is male and female, man, woman, boy, girl, he, she. Secondly, in making this decision, please also consider what will become of the family unit if there is no mother, father. Again, I ask you to follow the science. The following excerpt is from PubMed Central, which is a full-text archive of biomedical and life sciences journal literature at the United States National Institutes of Health's National Library of Medicine. And I quote, "Nearly 3 decades of research evaluating the impact of family structure on the health and well-being of children demonstrates that children living with their married biological parents consistently have better physical, emotional, and academic well-being. Pediatricians and society should promote the family structure that has the best chance of producing healthy children." So, according to the science, schools should be promoting the family structure of married biological parents for the best chance of producing healthy children. Embrace the diverse roles of mothers and fathers, men and women, male and female, he, she. One last point. Are those who are being champions of diversity by eliminating gender pronouns actually contributing to the loss of diversity
I'm sorry.
by making us all the
We're at
same?
time. We're at time.
Consider your decision. Thank you for letting me speak to you today.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, we're going to move now down to the last item on the agenda with school leadership. Consider approval of the student code of conduct and student handbook 2021-2022 school year.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Merrill's making his way to the podium, I just want to offer a few points of clarification with regard to our process this year and every year, actually. To remind everyone, the purpose of a handbook and a student code of conduct is to provide a reference for any topic that a parent may need to know about with regard to operations of a district. So for example, if an 8th grader comes home and says, "I want to dye my hair green," there's a place for a parent to go to see if that's allowable. What do I do to report an absence? How do I find out information about International Baccalaureate or academies? Those types of things. And what phone numbers can I find easily to know who to call? So during this process, we've heard from some constituents, and our team has taken those into consideration. And I do want to point out a few important distinctions. We have really no substantive changes to practice in our handbook. There's no additional intent or purpose with regard to gender distinction or identity in our schools. And there's no policy change here. As Dr. Merrill will now cover these changes, our team did get together, we did look at this, and he will now give you the revisions to the revisions.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Last meeting, we explained the changes to the student handbook, and I will seek to clarify just a little bit today. We're asking that you consider the approval of the student handbook. So as a reminder, I'd like to run through a few of the changes again. But just as you stated, they do not bring a change to policy nor necessarily a change to practice. We changed the language to be more encouraging, to streamline, and add consistency with neighboring districts who have also done this. In addition, we felt it would make it easier for parents as well as students to find the information they needed. There are minor changes to the dress code, including athletic wear in grades 7 through 8, which were already allowed in grades 9 through 12, and allowing students to have non-natural hair colors. We made changes in grades 3 through 4, social studies grade requirements, changes in homework allocation grades 5 through 12, and changes in ingenuity grading guidelines revisions as well through 5 through 12. And above, we have an example of some of the explanations, just so everybody can kind of see that. We've added more compassionate language that shows we believe parents are supporting their child's education, such as encouraging your child to put a high priority on education, change to continue to encourage your child to put a high priority on education. For parents who have access to BISD info, board/policy updates, etc., added verbiage that these items will be available at the campus reception rather than only being available online. Next slide. Some further examples are attainment of the distinguished level of achievement entitles a student to be considered for automatic admission to a public four-year college or university in Texas, depending on class rank. A student who will need to leave school during the day must bring a note from a parent that morning and follow their campus sign-out procedures before leaving the campus. ARD is the admission review and dismissal committee convened for each student who is identified as needing a full individual evaluation for special education services. The eligible student and parents are members of the committee. You can see the changes that are there on the example. I've already listed it, but we wanted to kind of go through and let you know of some of the changes to the dress code as well as just student attire. And so when you look at it, the ones that have changed are the ones that's aligned through it, where we've got athletic shorts in grades through 7 through 8. And we did that last year. It was high school, and so we went ahead and took it down to the middle school, which has been very well received. Really no issues with that whatsoever, which I'm very pleased for. And then the second one, or last one, is undyed and natural color in grades pre-K through 8. That still exists, but at the high school, what we've done is made some allowances for that to take place. And I've already stated it, but I wanted to revise, just to go back over it, the grading guideline revisions, changes in grades 3 through 4, social study requirements, just minor changes there, changes in homework allocations in grades 5 through 12, then ingenuity grading guideline revisions in grade 5 through 12. So really minor things in the student handbook that we've done with grading. So really, this is just some examples of kind of the recommendations that have been made. And again, we would ask for consideration for approval for the student handbook before we start school.
If I were a student or a staff member in BISD, am I supposed to look at these changes and think that I'm supposed to change my past behavior with regard to the use of gender-specific pronouns?
No, sir. No, sir, not at all. So really and truly, there isn't a change to practice. So when you look at what we've done, I've been in this position for 3 years. I oversee principals. I was a high school principal and middle school principal for 12. I have also students, my own personal children in the district, high school, middle school, boys, girls. And so when you look at it, there's really not a change. We did it for, as the items that are already listed. That was really, truly the intent of what it is.
And some of the changes to the changes really, I guess for one thing, my wife would appreciate because it was bad grammar. A lot of people still think bad grammar to say a student and then say
Yes,
there or whatever. So she's going to be happy with that, I know. But of course, the he, she, his, her is still, for the most part, being taken out. But again, I just want to make sure, because I think a lot of people care about this issue, is that is not intended to influence how we deal with our daily lives in Bryan ISD, correct?
No, sir. You're right. You are correct.
All right.
Can you go to this, maybe the last
Sure.
slide?
This one?
Yes, okay. So, a student who will need to leave school during the day must bring a note from a parent that morning and follow the campus sign-out procedures. So, throughout where we were going to put he or she, we're leaving that out.
So what we did is we made the changes that you see on the board, if I understand the question correctly.
Throughout.
Yes, ma'am. In similar fashions. A lot of times it's readability. If you read it, sometimes it obviously makes sense when you read it, a parent that morning. So it has to be so. It's just honestly in readability.
And we've listened to people.
Yes, ma'am, we have. Yes, ma'am. Had a few conversations personally with people as well.
Brian, can we go back to the screen that has
I can go back to any screen with some help.
the one that tells
Do I
about
have it?
the-
Okay.
the clothing thing? No, not that one.
Not
That's
that
a little
one.
chart like
This
that
one.
one.
All right.
So what did we and I might be not looking at
You're
it,
okay.
these readers. Did we say about the shirts? Did we discuss the shirts, the sleeves?
Yes,
Left that alone.
we let it in, yes, ma'am.
We just
Talking about
left that?
sleeveless? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we didn't make a
No.
change to that?
What's your question?
No change.
No changes there.
And you're right, Ms. Benford, that was discussed, but after consideration and
Yes.
discussion with several others, we left that one alone.
So it's reading as what? Sleeves, no non-sleeveless shirts?
I don't see it up there.
The students will not be allowed to wear sleeveless shirts.
Yes, ma'am. I don't see it up there, though.
It's not on this one.
It's not on the slide.
It's on a different
Yes, ma'am.
slide that we didn't, we
Which is
just
why
didn't
you're looking
post.
for it.
I move approval of the Student Code of Conduct and Student Handbook for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, but before I call a vote, I am going to call for discussion because I do want to go back and address real quickly the issue of the consultant and what I understand to be with the consultant. From time to time, we are required to come through and have external vendors, external consultants come in and evaluate different things. That happens throughout the school district. In this particular case, we did not seek out one individual consultant, nor was one individual consultant recommended over another. We went through, from what and again, you can confirm or correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
We went back through our normal procedure, which is to go back to the region centers
It was.
that we rely on. They provided two names, or a very short list of two potential vendors. The vendor that was brought in based on this requirement, only one of them responded. So this was not this was
Right.
in no way a selective
No.
process that we have to have this individual firm.
Right.
It was, whether it was luck of the draw or whether it was whatever they were our only option to
They were.
complete this review within the required point.
You're exactly right.
Okay. And I agree. I have a son and I have three daughters. And I assure you that I use proper pronouns, sometimes with expletives following. Mild expletives. They're all older now, so, but many of the times when we're referring to the group of them, or I'm referring to them generically, I will use the term kid.
Sure.
They are my kid and not specify a he or she.
Right.
And it's easier to, the language that comes in when you continually see within the document and just straight readability, the same repeated phrase over and over and over and over and over again doesn't minimize the fact that it is a he or a she. But I do appreciate, and I do like that now it's focused on the student.
Right.
It is a student, and we can get caught up in pronouns. I'm sure I can go back into the back room behind us in the back room, and I can find plenty of documents that have pronouns very different historically, and documents and student guides that just simply had he, used throughout. So things do change. Things have changed over time. But by focusing on the student and the student parents, we strengthen that. There is no doubt. We're speaking to the student.
Right.
And so, okay. Just mainly wanted to get that out there
I appreciate you doing that.
about the consultant. Because this is not part of a slippery slope.
Nope.
This is not a change to how, as Mr. Stasny pointed out, it is still very much the expectation of this board. And I'll state that right here, right now. It's very much the expectation that in the classroom, there are he and she
Right.
appropriate pronouns are used
Right.
in instruction and with students. A change to the wording within within a document, as important as this, needs to be made for readability, not to support, push, promote, or blend any type of social aspects, or I want to both alleviate fears and also state that that's not the goal here, at least from the board.
We appreciate the opportunity to clarify. We really do. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to work with our parents, to work with our students, and to work on this document. But it does represent, obviously, just for the students. So thank you for that, Mr. McCall, for clarification.
And if I didn't believe what Mr. McCall just said, I wouldn't be supporting this. It's as simple as that. So
Right.
I agree with what he said.
And thank you for listening. and
Absolutely.
Thank y'all for working hard in a relatively short amount of time.
Yes, ma'am.
To fix it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, at this time I have a motion by Fran Duane and a second by Dr. Harland. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. At this time, we will go back and pick up on the general flow of the meeting as presented in the agenda. And so we'll pick up with, back up with information item, policy update 117. Budget, sorry. I got ahead of myself and, wishful thinking on my part.
I understand. Thank you, sir. I guess I would be up here for both, so it would be okay. Matthew has the presentation up, but I realize we have some time constraints today, so we'll move through this. A lot of this information we have talked about previous meetings and things, so I'll try to go through that fairly quickly, and I'm more than happy to stop for questions if you have a question as we go along. This is just moving towards the adoption of the budget and setting our tax rate, those kind of things that we do every year at this time. And the first thing we'll look at, of course, our district goals. We always want to keep that in mind when we're working on budget and the decisions we make with our finances and things like that. The agenda things we want to cover, just our timeline. We did get our property values in that, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Estimated budget projections, group benefits, risk pool. We'll take a little bit of time on that because that's something new. And then debt service and child nutrition budgets as well. This is just our timeline. Every year we're kind of on this same grid since we're an August 31 year end. But we've had meeting finance committee updates and meetings with this. We did receive our certified values last week from the appraisal district. This will be pretty much our final budget update, and then we'll have a public hearing on the night meeting in August to set our tax rate and adopt our budget. Some challenges this year that are similar to last year. All things COVID, of course, is still going on. That affects our enrollment and attendance, which is one of the projections that we have to make and decide on that. Delays in getting some insurance policy quotes, and of course that's due to COVID as well as multiple weather events that we had. Then all the things that we've talked about with all the state and federal aid packages that we've had, amounts of those, timing on those kind of things have thrown a wrench in. And then we had, of course, a legislative session, which always has the potential to throw up some new ideas or some new things that we have to deal with. Luckily, there was not a lot in this one for finance purposes when we got all done. Our certified values this year came in, you can see the maintenance and operations about 2.6% above what it was the prior year. That's on the lower end of our normal, what would be our 10-year average, but still an increase, so that is good. Certified debt service or INS rates, of course, that's a little bit higher. That is changed. The difference is the 313 agreement, as that property limitation does not apply to the debt service, only to the M&O side. And this is the spreadsheet, the TEA Local Property Value Survey info. Last year was the first year for this. The House Bill 3 and all of that process as it went through changed how we set our property values. But essentially, we give TEA in this survey our last year's values, our current year values, and then it goes through the calculation and sets the rate at a certain level. And the whole design of this is to keep all of the district's rates within a certain limit, within a certain range. So this year, all of every district's rates will range from 0.822 to 0.9134. And it just works through that to make sure that all districts fall within that range. Our rate came in at 0.8918, which is just a fraction of a cent off of actually just a small amount less than last year's. And then this is our actual tax rates, or our proposed property tax rates. So last year, our maintenance and operations debt service was at 28 cents, and total tax was, you see, the 1.2325. This year, it'll be just slightly less for the M&O. The debt service rate will go down half a cent. So our actual tax rate for this coming year will be a little over 1/2 cent less than it was in the previous year. And this is our preliminary budget worksheet. We go through the formulas and calculate all of our numbers, but we come out with state revenue, foundation school program, revenue of about 54 million. Then the property taxes come in at about 89.7. Then there's some other federal and state revenues that come in, bringing our estimated total revenue about 155 million. And then the estimated total expenditures are about 154,869,000, bringing our surplus to 161,000 prior to any raises or compensation adjustments. Then we have later on the agenda, we'll talk some more about raises and different things. We have that recommendation for you today. But essentially what's built in here is the step for the people that are on the salary schedule as teachers, counselors, RNs, and that group. And then in addition to the step, there would be $1,000 additional added on to that. So essentially we just move the salary schedule up $1,000 on each step. And then in order to, another thing that we are proposing when we get to the compensation would be increasing our starting salary for teachers from $46,000 to $48,000. And that will require adjustment at the lower levels. That's around $375,000. But that's necessary to make sure that we don't have second and third year teachers making less than our starting teachers. So that would cause us some issues. And then across the rest of it, raises for auxiliary, paraprofessionals, administrators, and professionals at 3% in that regard, and brings us to an estimated budget shortfall of about 3.5 million. Let's see. Then we go to the group benefits risk pool, and this plan, of course, this is our health insurance, our self-insured plan. This runs on a January to December basis, so it's not on our fiscal calendar year. So getting the numbers to correspond as to when our calendar year, our fiscal year changes and their calendar year takes a little bit of doing. And there's always a lag as far as when medical expenditures are incurred and then when they're paid. So we're generally running a month or two. We'll get the June statement. We'll be able to finish up this week as we come up. So, but as of May, you can see the plan. This has been I would say an interesting year, but it's been an anomaly of a year for several reasons. But as we go through, the plan at that point at the end of May was roughly had a loss of about 3.9 million, which would put our fund balance at about negative 4.1 million. And so that's something that we'll have to discuss further as we go. We're still working on that. We actually have brought in an actuary who deals with insurance. I mean, those kind of people are number crunchers. I'm a number person, but they're, we get it way into the weeds with it, and they're used to looking at those things. So we bring them in as a third-party observer look at our plan and see what kind of recommendations they would maybe make in regards to premium increases, plan adjustments, those kind of things. And we actually have a meeting with them this afternoon. So we'll continue to look at those things. But I want to make sure we talk about the potential offsets for the group benefits risk pool. So we said we were negative 4.1 million at that point. A large portion of that was COVID-related expenditures, actually 2.3 million. So we will have already applied for reimbursement with ESSER funds, and so we would put 2.3 million back right off the top from ESSER. Other reserves that we have in fund balance, of course, every year we do designated a reserve fund balance. We have $1 million set aside in that in the general fund. We also have another option that we'll look at in the workers' comp insurance fund, which is another self-insured fund that we have. We believe there's about $2 million in excess there that we could use without running into any problems with that plan for sure. So that gives us about 5.3 million to set aside to shore that up, and without really touching our current or future budget. But that also leaves the question then we will have to address going forward, as we always do. And we're still in the process of looking at these, but this shows, and we've looked at this the last couple of years to try to look at the impact of any possible insurance premium changes on raises. I mean, we do believe at this point going forward that the self-insured is the way to go. We looked at some other options. One option, of course, would be the TRS. A lot of districts are under the TRS plan. If you look at our premiums here, the gold employee, a similar option on that under TRS would be approximately $600 a month higher for the employee part on that insurance, which could be offset by more district. But anyway, it would be about $600 whether we would pass that on to the employee or pick it up with the district per month per participant. So it's a significant increase if we were to go off of our self-insured plan onto the TRS plan. There's other options that we can look at, and we will be looking probably at maybe a fully insured or something other as an added plan to maybe help spread that risk of that insurance plan as we go forward. But this is just a sample of the example we're looking at to try to make sure as we go through the potential of increasing premiums for employees or increasing the district share or a combination of those, what we will end up with, and we'll bring that back. We'll probably would think we would talk about it in Finance Committee, try to iron some of those things out to bring you back a viable option.
So the difference between these two rows, the top row is employee plus family, and the bottom row is just employee only.
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and this, of course, is not all the is not all the examples. There's a platinum tier. There's a high deductible as well.
This just gives us sort of a benchmark
Yes.
of where.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
this is the most popular plan.
Yes, this has the
the
most
most
employees. It has
employees.
more than half the employees on one of these plans, so that's why I use that as an example.
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess you explained this, but it says 5% on the raised stipend. Is that just an example, or?
Well, that would be what we're proposing at this point, so it'd be the 3% raise, plus then the 1% and the 1% stipends during the year.
Okay, then okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no, so that would be another concern, but if we get into all of the issues, those 1% would not carry forward to next year, perhaps. I mean, they're going to be paid with ESSER funds, which is not, a permanent funding source. Those will go away. And we'll, of course, we talked about before, we'll be dropping down, diminishing that amount of spending so we don't go off the fiscal cliff, so to speak. But we'll be reducing that amount that we spend over the next 4 years to wean off of that. So that is I would probably, when I'm looking at that, I'll break that down into the 3% raise, and then what is the effect of the 1% and the 1%? Yes, sir, that's a good question. Okay, we'll go on to debt service. This is one of the budgeted budgeted funds that we use. You can see the property tax receipts based on a 27.5 cent tax rate on the valuation. That's a 0.5 cent reduction from prior year. Would give us about 26 million in revenue for that. The state puts in part because of the homestead exemption. Principal and interest due would be the 26 million as well. So you'll see that that one will come out to a balanced zero difference at the end of the year. School nutrition is the other one that we always have to pass a budget for. And I put this one on here, the original. This is some good news on this one. The original 2021 budget, we showed a negative of 1.265 million. And you may remember when we closed last year, we had a deficit of about 1.8 million. The state, Texas Department of Agriculture, is adjusting the reimbursements for last year, so they are, we're expecting about an $825,000 reimbursement for that prior year, so that would bring that down to about $1 million. 2021, at this point, Ms. Sunday Fryrear, who runs this program, has done an excellent job, and we're expecting to break even or better for the 2021. So we'll bring that back to you as a budget amendment on the 16th. And then, of course, for next year, 21-22, we think that we'll be able to do a balanced budget as this shows right here. So that's some good news on food service as well. And that's the update. We have later on another item. We'll be talking about the compensation increases and those kind of things. Are there any other questions on this at this point?
Well, thank you for the good news part.
Well, we every once in a while I get to bring some good news. So.
And we know you're going to work hard on the no news part.
Yes, ma'am. We're trying to keep it all balanced and move forward. So we feel like we're pretty good. We have some unknowns that we're working through, but we feel pretty good about the situation as we're sitting right now.
And thanks, Sandy. She does.
Yeah, she does an excellent job. And those people do a great job, as most of the departments and campus and everything have been very helpful in working through a lot of these issues and transferring, budgets and different things with ESSER and all of the aid packages that we've dealt with this year.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Let's move on to policy update 117.
So we have policy update 117, the legal part. I think you all have had that for review. Ms. Kuhn has part of this. I'm talking about the local changes for CH local, which is the purchasing and acquisition. And in your packet, I think you have in blue, that is the recommendations that were put in by TASB. There's a couple of red items, which are changes that we are suggesting at this point, and they're fairly minor. One of them is the policy currently reads that costs between $25,000 and $50,000 require approval of the superintendent and shall be reported to the board. That actually, if it hits $50,000, that requires the way it reads, the board should see an item that hits $50,000. So we're changing that to $49,999.99. So we're in compliance with both of those items. Another item is on the competitive bidding. As it reads right now, if competitive bidding is chosen as purchasing method, the superintendent shall prepare bid specifications. We're actually adding in there the superintendent or designee shall prepare bid specifications is the only change, and that would fall then to my department as pretty much what practice is for at this point. And then competitive seal proposal is the same thing. If competitive seal proposal is chosen as purchasing method, the superintendent, and we would add or designee, shall prepare the request for proposals and specifications for items. And that is it on CH local. CV local is facilities and construction. The one change in the red that we have is under change orders. Currently, as change orders, if you read it by the letter of the law, any change order would be required to come back to the board. And that would include such things as, we can't get the hardware for a door, so we're changing the hardware that we're going to use or the company that we're going to use for that hardware. Or, something that simple really probably requires board approval. So what we're recommending the change is that we would add to the approved plans or or actual construction of the facility. And then if the change order involves the change of scope for the project or increases the amount originally approved by the board. So in other words, if you're changing the scope, which we would consider to be, moving walls or adding an addition to, or something fairly major, we would think is a change in scope. And then, of course, anything that would go over the original approved budget amount would also come back for that amount. But that would allow just to make sure that we are following exactly what we want to do, because I don't believe the intent was to make sure that every single thing that we changed, for example, like I said, the door handles, or if we changed a different window bender without changing a price or anything, that would still technically be a change order. So that would be our recommendation on that one. And then there's another part on there as far as selection process. It's the superintendent, we would just add, or designee shall solicit a statement of qualifications from architects or engineers using the criteria that we have in place. So only changing that as being the designee as well as the superintendent on that.
I would tell you in general, I don't have an issue with the administration handling change orders. I definitely don't want to see doorknobs, lengthy discussion on doorknobs. And, but at the same time, I also, I've since not recently, but in the past, where there were, say, different types of electronic components down to not fire alarms, so it's kind of line, but I don't even think that were changed from a top of the line to something less to save money, but then we had to come back in and deal with them earlier. And fire alarm is a bad example. That wasn't one of them, but I think air conditioning controllers or something like that. I mean, there was just something that's like, oh, well, they put in the cheapest one they possibly could to save the most money, but then we had to turn around and replace them at a later date. So on the surface, it looked like, yeah, that was a great change order. It saved us, a lot of money.
Right.
And long term, it was not. And so I just want to be, go on the record, just being cautious of that. Just because it's saving money in the short term does not mean it's the best.
Correct.
Or if we were sold one thing to the board and then it was swapped out with something considerably cheaper to save money, I would at least like to request a heads up in the logic behind that, but not necessarily don't hold it up to take action on, but just
right. I think this is scheduled to go to consent for the next night, so we'll review that and make sure that we can see if there's a little rewording we can do to make sure that there's not a change that's made that becomes less.
As simple as making sure that it's not just we're moving a wall. Right. I mean, it's a structural change that is significant, but there can also be other changes.
Right. Or
that
changing,
can be significant as well.
Yeah. Or changing quality or something to that effect. Okay.
Right.
We'll look at that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ms. Kuhn
has been an issue in the past. I would say not with this administration, but in the past we had issues where things just happened. And then the board's being asked, well, why did this happen? Well, the board didn't know about it until it was already done. So, because that's just the way it was. And so it is a legitimate concern because ultimately we're responsible for the quality of what goes in.
So, and I remember one example that was brought up. There was a significant change, I think, at Kemp when it was being built. Now, that particular example I remember would have been considered a change in scope. But I can see there could be potential. So we'll relook at that again before we come back.
There's so much construction going on. I mean, good, yay. But I remember when I was first elected, we had a facilities committee of some of the board members. And I think Paul was in on some of the meetings, and so he knows what I'm talking about. And a lot of times, that was the information that we're asking when we need it versus when we don't need it, and it was funneled through that committee. And that committee made some decisions on, yeah, the board should hear this, or this is okay, we'll take it to them. And, I mean, I'm not trying to give anybody more time and effort spent, but that was one way that that this level communicated with the board, and then we talked exactly about what we're talking about. And we had a lot of construction going on at that time, then we kind of didn't, so we dissolved it. It was just kind of a thought on what we might want to do, those who love construction.
And
Which,
meetings,
you know,
construction and
Good idea.
meetings.
Constructive meetings.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to speak to you about policy local DEC, which deals with compensation, benefits, leaves, and absences. And when we got this new policy, actually there was a webinar that came out from the Texas Association of School Boards, because basically what TASB did was they pretty much stripped out the policy as we have had it in the past. And they said that through the course of time that districts were just putting everything into policy and not developing regulations. And so they have said, take that out and build your own regulations. So I have accepted, or I'm recommending that, we accept TASB's rewording and of the policy as they present it, but then we're writing a regulation as to how we carry out the policy, which is what TASB wants us to do, not have it all in there. You guys basically, you adopt it and you approve what we're supposed to do, but our regulations will tell us how we do it. And so I did not change any of the red line version that TASB has, and you should have it in your packet. As you can see, most of it is red line marked out, and that will all the markouts will go into a regulation.
So just, I think what in my mind at least is a logical follow-up, if we're taking this out of policy and putting it into guidelines, do we have those guidelines captured? I mean, are they ready to?
They're ready as far as what I've done. I'd like to present them to Dr. Whitbeck. I worked on them last week when we were over in the Admin Institute, but they're ready to go, I feel like. So we'll have them before school starts, obviously. But this will come back on consent as well.
Okay. So by the time they get back around, we'll have.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. And that will take us down into the consent agenda for this meeting. And I will entertain.
Move up, I'm
We're not there yet.
over there.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
we're consent.
Sorry. Go ahead, Felicia.
Go on.
I was trying to figure it out. I make a motion to approve all the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Binford, a second by Ms. Waller. All in favor? Aye.
I was looking at the previous thing, knowing there was no motion for that one. I know, I need to focus.
All right, that will take us back into business services and consider approval of the superintendent's salary recommendation for employees for the 21-22 school year.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McCall. So I've already mentioned this, and we had talked about it at a previous meeting, but you should have copies there, I believe, of the recommendation for salary increases for 21-22, as well as the proposed salary schedules for, of course, the teachers, registered nurse, librarian, media specialist, and then a second one for counselors, which is essentially the same, just $3,500 increase from the teacher one. Just to highlight, to go through the recommendation, the first item would be raise the starting teacher pay from $46,000 to $48,000. And then, as we mentioned in the previous item, that all eligible teachers, counselors, librarians, and nurses would receive the step increase on the approved salary schedule based on their years of service, as well as at least an additional $1,000. And then that takes into account, of course, the few adjustments that we'll have to make at the lower end of that schedule to make everybody on a graduating basis. As also, all eligible employees in this pay group would receive one-time stipends of 1% in December, and then 1% again in May, funded with ESSER grant funds. And we did go ahead and put a minimum on that of $250. I don't know that it would apply to that group, but just in case, we have that on there. The rest of the items ended up being, as we got done, pretty much the same for everybody across the board: custodial, school nutrition, auxiliary staff, transportation, buses and aides, as well as all eligible paraprofessionals, and then all eligible professional administrative employees as well, but 3% increase based on the midpoint of their pay group, and then the stipend of 1% in December and May, funded with ESSER grant funds. And that all was across the board on every one of the groups.
So these are in line with the budget stuff that you just presented to us?
Yes, ma'am. I put that. That was all included in there as well. So
I move approval of the superintendent's salary increase recommendation as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Dr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And next, we'll move down to item 2, discuss and consider approval of a resolution to budget and prioritize state compensatory funds for the 21-22 fiscal year.
yes, sir. And this is an item that we bring forward every year, and it carries for our state compensatory funds. We're required by the Texas Education Code to use accelerated instruction in subject areas that students perform unsatisfactorily on an end-of-course exam. And we're required to budget state compensatory funds separately and prioritize them to support these costs. The attached resolution, as you have there, supports that, allocating those funds. And then that is one of the items that we will bring back after the beginning of the school year. I believe Dr. Ibarra's team will have a report on that. So we'll be bringing forward probably in September, October, the outcome of those. A lot of that is used for summer school, and Edgenuity is another one that's used for those things. So.
I move approval of the attached resolution that budgets and prioritizes state compensatory funds to support the additional cost associated with unsatisfactory performance on an end-of-course exam as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Davis, a second by Ms. Binford. All in favor?
Aye.
And moving on to discuss and consider approval of purchase over $50,000 for property and general liability and automobile insurance.
Yes, sir. This is our annual renewal for our property, casualty, and automobile policy. As we've gone through, and I have Mr. Grant Graham and Don Smith from ANCO here as well today to discuss. And if we have any questions or just give any details about the property market. As most of you know, the property market has been hit pretty hard over recent years with hurricanes and storms and things like that. Bryan ISD, as just one example, we've had major claims from a May 2020 hailstorm, a February 2021 hailstorm, and of course in April 2021, and then of course in February the whole state with the freeze storm. And all of that taken into account when we built the budget originally, I actually put in a 50% increase as being the estimated amount that we felt like would be a number we possibly could see in order to get coverage. The amount actually comes out, what came back, TPS, our current company, actually gave a quote and was the lowest option that we had. But it was roughly about 26% of an increase from the prior year, which is still substantial. And we realize that, but when you take into account the market as it sits out there right now and the amount of claims that we have had, I can't say it's a bargain, but it was absolutely a good feeling to get a quote, and it was still less than by quite a bit than we had imagined that we might have to go to. There's not a lot of difference in the policy as written. There are some changes, but not drastically different than the prior year in most cases.
Well, I read the before and after about 3 times, and I still wasn't sure I was understanding it as far as whether there was really a significant change regarding deductible and minimum with regard to the old versus the proposed. Is there any significant difference there? Because the wording I just couldn't follow.
Right.
The main difference in the deductible is it's going to a flat 3% deductible for wind and hail.
Wind and hail.
Last year, it was just 3% for hail, and there was a $500,000 deductible for windstorm. So they just went across the board 3% deductible.
Which is going to possibly increase our pay, what we have to pay?
With the changes, it doesn't increase what you have to pay. What it will increase is your deductible if there's a windstorm. So
Okay.
your hail deductible, which is where we incurred the losses over the past 2 years, that deductible stays the same.
Okay.
At 3%.
Yes, and I would state also, we did make an adjustment to the reserve fund balance last year to compensate some, or put some in reserve of fund balance because of the changes that were made from the prior year to the current year policy, and we'll review that again to make sure if we should reserve some more in fund balance for that change as well.
I'll move approval of Texas Political Subdivision Self-Insurance Fund as the property, automobile, and general liability insurance carrier as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Stasny, a second by Dr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, and that will take us down into consider approval for intermediate 3, the GMP.
Yeah, this is for the guaranteed maximum price for intermediate number 3. And as you recall, in June, when we brought the GMP number 1 for the still package, we told you that the GMP number 2, which would be the rest of the project, would be forthcoming. And today we have that number for you. And Jamala opened and received the bids on July 14th and has been going through all those and getting everything finalized and making sure the bids met the scope of work that was in the project and everything else. That GMP number 2 came out to $38,070,457. And when you combine that with GMP 1 for the still package, the total construction cost for intermediate number 3 is at $45,735,519, which is $182,140 under the construction budget that we had for this project.
Today.
Yep.
Yes.
Right now.
Right now. Yep. And I have Jamala, I have Rusty, Seth, and Bobby with Jamala here, and Ron and Manny with PBK if there are any questions about the process we've gone through or any question about the numbers that we have for this project.
That budget includes contingency, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes. So those savings could be higher at the end of the project with any
We'll
leftovers.
pray for that.
Yes,
Of course
absolutely.
they will. Yeah. Well, I know some of us serve on the Finance Committee, and so we were able to hear more about this package last week and got to ask a lot of questions. So thank you all for your work on that.
I move approval of the guaranteed maximum price GMP for the Phase 2 for Intermediate 3 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Dwayne, and a second by Dr. Harland. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I just want, I want to point out on one point that even it's voted, it's done, but the annotation in the board notes has a different number for the, and it doesn't affect the motion or what was approved, because what is approved is attached, not necessarily in the annotation. But we do need to make note of that there's it has 38,222,000 or 200,022
Yeah, the attachment's correct.
dollar. The attachment is correct, and that's the amount that was approved.
I'll go in and look at it to
Okay.
correct that number.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, we have teaching and learning. Consider approval of revisions to board policy DEA local.
Yep, this is a pretty simple one. So because we are in the TIA allotment year where we're capturing data and we need to quantify what teacher evaluation looks like, we've always used words, accomplish, distinguish. We had assigned numbers to everything so that within TIA, as we capture data, we can send a quantitative measure in for evaluation for our application. So that means that in DEA local, we had to change a bit of our language, which means that we added one portion that you can see underneath pay increases. It says that no employee with less than a satisfactory performance evaluation shall receive a pay increase. Teachers evaluated under the T-test model shall be considered to have less than satisfactory performance, and here's the part we added. If the average of all dimensions across all 4 domains on the summative evaluation is between 0 and 1.9. And then it goes on to say, as it did before, teachers with less than satisfactory performance shall be placed on a performance plan. And so just so you kind of have the context of that, T-test takes you from a 1 to a 5. Those are the 5 different ratings you can get across 16 dimensions. And that comes, into the learning environment, instruction you're planning, and then your professional responsibilities. And so the average across all 16, if it falls between 0 and 1.9, would be considered less than satisfactory performance. And so we're asking for the approval of that small change to DEA local.
I can't find the motion.
Yes, I have it.
Yeah. I move approval of the revisions to the board policy DEA local as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Dr. Davis, a second by Dr. Harland. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Give me 1 second, because did not expect those parts to, I'll make sure with all the shifting that we did not skip anything, that we
We did good.
did good. All right. Yep. Okay. Do we need to go back into closed session?
No,
for
it
any-
sounded like you might want to,
Yeah.
sounded like it to me.
So, do we have,
Only that one thing? Okay. We do not have this one.
okay. Okay, at this time, the board will convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code Chapter 551.071.074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 1:46. 2:08. No action was taken in closed session. I'm sorry, 2:00. Come on. Tiffany, I'm going to let you get the right time. I can't tell if that's a 3 or an 8. 2:03. All right, I'm going to go with 3. Starting to need my cheaters again. If there is no further business, no further comments, then we are adjourned. Thank you.